dive into them, because the question that always begs to be answered is, what's the market doing? And lest you think that talking to your neighbor or talking to some Joe Blow down the street about what their house sold for, or pulling these stories of market insanity and then assuming that it never changes, lest you think that's a good idea, we just want to dive in and give you the freshest take on what the Oklahoma City market is doing. And then you can tune in next week for what the Salt Lake City market is doing. So we will do a market update for each of the markets that we operate in, so that you can tune in and know exactly what the market's doing. I do want to give a good quick plug to a video coming up next week that I'm particularly excited about on the Will Frazier channel. I'm going to be doing an exploration into why this cup is half full. It will be called Why I Want to Be a Guatemalan, and it's one of the most fascinating things that I'm learning about right now. And I just want to pub that. I'll link it below when it comes out, and I'd love for you to journey with me there. This is going to be where the real estate related content lives, and that's going to be where my pet projects live. So without further ado, let's jump in. Today, we're going to do it a little bit differently, hopefully a little more entertainingly. I'm going to flip this around, and we're going to watch the video that the MLS OK, the Oklahoma City MLS Association, has put out with the freshest broker stats, and then let's discuss it. All right, so without further ado, let's breathe. All right, that was wonderfully prepared from MLS OK. Let's see if we can. Oh, here we go. So what I want to do is hover over a few of the different points here that are worth mentioning. Let's see if we can do this silently. There we go. So new listings increased for single-family homes by 10%. So that's cool. That's not your normal November, and I mean, typically you've got a decrease, but obviously the market insanity and the heat of the market and the pent-up demand from buyers has led to a lot of abnormal timing with our market, and perhaps we can sustain this over time for some amount of time. But what we know is that over the last month, we saw an increase in single-family listings and an explosion in new townhome condo listings, but later we're going to learn that the median sale price for condo also bottomed out. So that's fascinating. Pending sales increased 21% for single family and 41% for condo homes. So a lot of movement, not just in new listings, but also those listings going under contract. And therefore, because we have more listings being taken out of the market, we also have a decrease in inventory. So further decreasing of the inventory, 7% for single families and massive townhome decrease. So things are not getting looser, they're getting tighter. But I would say the feel of the market and the data would say that the pace of tightening is quite a bit lower. And so we'll see. There's going to be an interesting thing to watch over December. We're halfway through December right now, but then January, February, which typically they're cold, they're mucky, they're the middle of semesters. So typically January and February can be very, very low months of sales. Typically that also correlates with low months of inventory. But as we see people seeing what happened in really May, April, all the way through October, we see that the ever increasing sale values, we see the decreasing days on market. And so it leads to laggards and people who are maybe opportunists, maybe people who ended the summer and said, you know what, let's look for a job in another market, and have been slowly moving in motion towards a different plan. And now those homes are coming on the market. So it will be interesting to see how many real buyers are out there in January and February. And if we continue to see an increase in new listings, because if increase in new listing is also met with real buyers, great, great for the sellers. If the new listings exceed the amount of real buyers, then we'll see a slowing of the pace at which a new listing becomes a pending and then a sold listing. And so that pace is part of what makes the market feel insane right now. So inventory decreased slightly. All right. Month supply of inventory decreased again, 14% for single family homes and 53% for condos. Fascinating. All right, I want to get to the comparative charts. All right, November 2021 up against October 2021. So what you can see is that we closed slightly fewer, but just slightly fewer total transactions in November than October. We closed slightly fewer in dollar value, but the average and the median both went up. The movement in median was more significant than the movement average. Percentage of selling price to list price is the same, which is one of the reasons that we work so hard with our buyers to set the right mindset of every seller out there knows this. And now because it's so mainstream and we've been focusing on this so robustly in the mainstream media, every would-be seller out there has been mainlining the market's crazy. It's a seller's market, all these different ideas. So the idea of you coming in 20% under list price and getting an offer accepted it's laughable, to be honest. That's not to say it never happens, but when is it going to happen is a totally different thing. So day one on market, probably not. And I'm speculating here. I'm using statistics and my own experience to anecdotally guesstimate what your experience might be. So it's not gospel truth, it's not fact, it's not immutable, but I just want to put this out there, that if you're trying to get a deal, if the seller and the seller's agent have put the home on the market at a market-friendly price, which you can see here, the average price in the Oklahoma City market is $266. That's insanity compared to 5 years ago, but it's not insanity compared to today, because that's what's happening today. And that's why data and statistics are so important, is because they can take us out of our feelings and put us into the real ones. So when you're looking at what's happening and you see let's say an average house that you're pursuing and it's listed at, say, $265. Well, you might feel as though that's a high price and you might want to buy it at $230, but if it truly does conform with the average home which would track with the average price, then you should expect it to go for 265, possibly even a little higher. And so it's an exercise in futility often to say, this house came on the market, it's priced at 265, it's beautiful, or it's just what we've been looking for, trying to buy our average home. So let's offer 230. Let's offer what we think it should be worth. Well, we want to lean into what the market shows a willingness to pay, and we want to navigate the market intelligently in light of that. So all that to say, if it's day 1, 2, and 3 on market, maybe don't claw, for a deal. But something that we've covered in past videos is the increasing tendency for homes to break contract, because these bidding wars that ensue day 1, 2, and 3 on market are often themselves exercises in futility. It's not uncommon for listing and listing agents to receive like hundreds, dozens, normally, and I've heard of over 100 offers being received on a property. So when that happens, it is insanity. Insanity. You cannot. It is to even go through that many offers at one time with an expiry time. Like, you're doing this in a compressed time frame. And to go through this many offers, to make sure that all the agents filled them out correctly, that the ones that are using loans are in fact pre-qualified and you have their lender letter. The ones that aren't, you have a bank statement or something that shows that they actually have the ability to perform on the offer that they're making. Like, to go through all that on 12 offers is insanity. On 50 is unthinkable, and on 100, but so that's insanity. And it's not uncommon for buyers and buyers agents to walk into that insanity and say, well, Tim, you better just throw out the highest number you can. And they wouldn't say it in those terms, but they might say something like, well, you're pre-qualified for $500,000. This house is listed at $265. Do you think it's worth $350 to you? That's still significantly under. And Tim 2 might say, hey, yes, this is worth $350 to us. And then they come in at $350. And all these things happen in the heat of battle with the mindset of, hey, we know that this is not going to last. We know that we need to win this before we even have the right and ability to step into the next phase. But that next phase is where a lot of reality checks happen. That's when you do your inspection. You walk through the house. Some, perhaps often, that's the first time you walk through the house, which, hey, it's when in Rome. You got to do business like the Romans do. So if you want to even have an option to walk through the house, make your offer. But sometimes you find that the listing agent or their photographer or someone else was less than ethical with their photos and very generous with their angles and didn't leave out or didn't include certain things that ought to have been included. And when you find those things happen, it's not surprising to say, hey, this has a Federal Pacific panel. It might need 12 piers and this and this and this. And then you go back to the seller and you say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, or Mr. and Mr. Seller, whatever, these things need to happen. So we love your home. We're still willing to honor our price, but we need you to either fix these or give us a credit for fixing them. And the seller will say what? Wait a minute, didn't we have 30 other offers? Well, what if one of them doesn't want us to do that? No, thank you. And the seller goes back to the market. And then a lot of times what's happening is you go back to the market, you get the same ravenous reception, not with the 30 offers, not with the 30 offers, but with 5. One of those is chosen. You walk through the process of inspections and da 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 da. And then the seller goes, wait a minute, didn't we have 4 other offers? And so you go back to the market that 3rd time. And what I'm seeing some leanings towards is when you have a seller that's going back to the market, they're optimistic at first, and then they're realistic at the end. And for many sellers, they just want to sell their house. It'd be nice if we get to sell it at this insane high market value, market price. But if the market is playing games and running you through the ringer, then later you might be more willing to entertain a lower offer with certainty. So don't go for blood. day one on market. It's not respectful for the agent. It's not respectful for the seller. But let's be intelligent and think through what the seller's trying to accomplish. And if you see something coming back on market several times, maybe in this climate, don't automatically assume that there's something grossly wrong with it, but say, hey, this might be worth a deeper look. And then see, is there an opportunity for us to achieve what we want or need to achieve and give the seller what they want or need to achieve? And that's how you make a win-win. And in this market, it's still possible. It's just not typically going to come day 1, 2, or 3 on market. So that's just a little aside, just to be able to be prudent in establishing all this. And then what you can't see under me is days on market is going up slightly from October to November, and then number of listings went down slightly from October to November. It's down about 140 something. So why is days on market going up? Days on market's going up because things move slower in the winter. It does. Like, it takes forever to get an appraiser out. It takes forever to get roofers out. It takes forever to get anyone out because the holidays from November till New Year's are just a cluster bomb of days off, vacations, and considering how much the real estate industry relies on independent contractors, you can imagine that getting folks to show up systematically through the holidays is tough. So the average days on market tends to be a little lengthier, not just the amount of time that it takes to close once you're under contract, but also the amount of time that it takes to go under contract. And then here, we're just going to look through the last 6 months of sales. You can see June being a high point, but then we had another surge late. So July down from June, bumps up to be almost the highest of the entire year in August of number of closings, and then a hard plunge in October, continuing the downward plunge in total closings in November. Very, very normal, very standard with what you would expect to see in the market. So in total dollar value, listings process. So this would be new listings. So how many listings are being put on the market? And so you can see that follows identically this earlier. Like, it follows. Actually, look at that. It's a little more of a whip. That's a little bit more of a whip. And by that I mean, what you can expect to see is, so your closings, so the shape of this curve here between the way it flows, you got June is the high, August is the second high, and then you see this descent from September out. When we look at this residential listings process, you see that same movement of May's the high, then down in June, second high in July, and then down. But look at this curve. Like, we're a lot steeper decrease in number of listings coming online in August, September, and October. And that's consistent with what we see in the rest of our data. But the point here being, can you predict going into January and February with a sharp decrease, a deceleration in the amount of listings coming on market, which typically, like I said, the number of real buyers in January and February are lower, so it balances out. Our month supply of inventory doesn't actually, it changes, but the velocity of closings changes drastically. So you got fewer real buyers. No, I'm sorry, it stays the same. Month supply of inventory decreases, the velocity stays the same, or the churn stays the same, because you've got fewer listings, but you've got fewer real buyers, so it balances out. But will we see fewer listings, but more real buyers of people who've been trying to buy and have been dejected? People have been trying to buy and just haven't found what they're looking for. Will we see an increase in the churn, or the pace of listings being taken off market throughout January and February, or will we see the normal tapering down? And then, bonus to those of you who have stuck around, what will happen when the Fed increases interest rates in February, March? What will happen? And why are they increasing interest rates? If you know, tell me. We'll do some videos about that in the future. And if you are curious about this thing, if you're looking at it and saying, man, the real estate market's been insane, all things have been insane, but what's going to happen when the Fed tapers off their stimulus and their quantitative easing? And what is quantitative easing? And what's going to happen to the housing market when the Fed raises interest rates? And then how much are they going to raise interest rates? It's anyone's guess, but there will be an effect. Terribly sorry. December is not my friend. What will be the effect? And knowing that might, especially if you're thinking of real estate investing, it might determine the pace that you go forward at. And it might determine what you do with things right now in order to prepare yourself for next first to second quarter. All right. Thanks for joining. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope that this has been useful for you. If you have specific questions about the Oklahoma City real estate market, you can comment on this video, or you can reach out to us on our website, and I will post the link to this video when I get it finished next week. And I'd love to journey with you in the process of figuring out how we can become just a little bit better continually.